We are the government. The government isn't someplace in Ottawa. It's not someplace in the legislature. We are the government. But how we treat other people, how we treat our neighbors, how we treat people in our family, that is how we treat people in our country, in our province. It is just that simple. It is not complicated.
Welcome to The Scaries, brought to you by RaiseHER Co. I'm Sky.
And I'm Talitha. We are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 4 territory and the homeland of the Métis. In each episode, we tackle the alarming, inconceivable, questionable, shocking, and scary statistics relating to, impacting, and intervening with the lives of women and girls worldwide.
You'll hear the scary truth, take away tools and tips, and learn about what you can do about it. And The Scaries is an opportunity to raise awareness, share resources, and collectively use our power as women and supporters of women to make real change. As always, we like to note that this podcast is our opinions only, and it's for entertainment purposes only. So please do take everything we say with a grain of salt, and note that some content could be triggering, so listen with caution.
As straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied settler women, we are very aware of the privilege that we have, and we want to use this platform to spread awareness about the scary reality that women from around the world face in different life situations.
Why?
Because sometimes nothing is scarier than being a woman.
So is it just us, or is 2025 already feeling like the season finale of democracy?
Yeah, we are talking about the upcoming federal election in Canada on April 28th, 2025. And before you roll your eyes and zone out because politics isn't your thing, just let us stop you right there.
Mm-hmm. Because if you're a woman, a girl, or someone who loves and supports them, politics is your thing, or it should be. It decides your healthcare. It decides your childcare or lack thereof, your access to abortion care or lack thereof, and fertility treatments, your workplace rights, your pay, your maternity leave or your paternity leave, and whether your daughter's future is one of possibilities or limitations, to name but a few.
Just a couple. Mm-hmm. We want to be very clear. This election isn't just another date on the calendar. This is a very critical turning point. Canada is still reeling from the pandemic's impact on women's economic participation, on mental health, on gender-based violence, all things that we've covered on this podcast in previous episodes. And decisions that are made this April could either start to close those gaps or completely open them up permanently.
And there's more to this urgency. If you zoom out a bit, because globally things are getting tense, scary. Tariffs, or the threat of them, wars, populist uprisings, climate change, digital surveillance. This isn't the world we grew up in at all.
No.
And when instability rises, women's rights are often the first to get rolled back. And we've seen this already happen.
Extremely. Yeah. So we're going to talk about something that's been quietly, or not so quietly, shaking the foundations of women's rights around the globe. Donald Trump is back in office.
Donnie.
Old Donnie. Donnie is back in office. And the war on women, well, it is not theoretical anymore. It's real, it's coordinated, and it's spreading.
Since his return to the White House in 2025, Trump has dismantled key pillars of civil rights legislation, gutted protections for workplace discrimination, and aggressively rolled back federal support for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And actually, I think I saw like some words or terms that got removed from, was it like, I don't know.
Like women.
Women was a word that got removed from, like, I don't know, it was policies or certain like big programs, but like we're not allowed to say women anymore.
Yeah, I feel like it was like submitting something to government. I mean, I'm not paying attention to the politics in that way as much, but it was like, like women is just a word that you're not allowed to use anymore, which is absolutely incredible. So in March, like a month ago, his administration moved to eliminate what they called gender ideology, quote unquote, from federal programs, targeting reproductive health funding, trans rights, and school curriculums. That's not governance. It's authoritarian. It's patriarchal messaging with real world consequences.
Hugely. And it's not just happening in the US. Leaders from around the world are watching and emulating Trump. From Brazil to Hungary, from provincial backbenchers in Canada to international coalitions, we're seeing a coordinated effort to reframe masculinity as dominance and power, and feminism as a threat to the national identity.
Very, very scary.
Yes.
Even here at home, Canadian politicians like Pierre Poilievre are echoing these messages. subtly at first, challenging the language of equity, quote unquote, using buzzwords like freedom and parental rights and traditional values. But make no mistake, the playbook is borrowed and it is dangerous.
The Nation recently described it best. The U.S. is no longer just neglecting gender equity, it is actively undoing it. And that ripple effect is being felt everywhere.
We don't learn from what's happening across the border. We risk waking up to a Canada that no longer protects the progress women have fought so hard for.
And that's why this election is about more than politics. It's about holding the line on human rights. Because if we don't vote like it matters, we'll find out what happens when we stop being loud. And of course, there's more work to do. But the idea of handing the wheel over to someone who wants to turn back the clock 100 years and turn back the clock on so many things we fought so hard for, that's not just risky and idiotic, if you ask me. Seriously.
And just idiotic, point blank.
Yeah.
So here's why we need women involved. Because when women aren't at the table, we're on the menu. Women bring different lived experiences and the issues that matter most to women, like reproductive rights, childcare, elder care, pay equity, gender-based violence, to name again but a few. These don't magically get solved when they're not centered in political platforms.
And it's not about voting for women's issues. It is that every issue is a women's issue. We make up 50% of the population. These things impact the population. Climate change, women are disproportionately impacted. Budget cuts, women tend to be the first affected when the services disappear. Healthcare policy, don't even get us started on that one.
No.
Honestly.
That's why today we're breaking down what each party is actually saying and not saying about women's rights and equity. We're bringing receipts, resources, as we always do, and one incredible guest who proves it's never too late to step into your power.
So grab your coffee, your protest signs, your voter cards, whatever you need to feel ready to get into this discussion, and let's get into it. So here's a stat for you. As of 2021, women made up just 30% of the House of Commons. And that means over 70% of the people making laws in the country are not women. And they're making laws about and for women.
Yes, exactly. Or that exclude women.
Yeah.
And when women aren't in the room, you bet women's issues aren't either. We're talking about maternal health care, pay equity, childcare access, and safety from gender-based violence.
So this isn't about getting more women elected per se. I mean, well, that would be lovely.
Right, sure.
It's about electing people who give a damn about women's lives and taking advantage of the hard-earned right as women, as humans, to vote.
And look, we get it. Canadian politics can feel like watching a very polite game of dodgeball, but also very weirdly, a lot of name calling in the House of Commons. It gets very like politely game of dodgeball, but also like a weird transactional like bullying of in middle school. I don't know. It's very, very weird. Lots of talk, not a lot of action. And someone's always claiming that they're listening while simultaneously ignoring the actual question.
Totally. And that's why we're here. We're here to decode the jargon, to learn alongside you, cut through the stereotypes of each party that we all likely hear based on whatever our circles are, how we were raised, and talk about what each of the major political parties is really offering women in this upcoming election.
Right. But first, we're going to take a second and roll back time to our history books and just acknowledge how far we've come and remind ourselves why it's imperative that we women are out at the voting polls at the end of this month.
So let's rewind to 1918 when some Canadian women finally got the right to vote in federal elections. And I do mean some. It started with white women, largely of British descent, who were over 21 and who met the certain property or citizen requirements.
Of course. So women of color, Indigenous women, immigrant women, they were excluded. It wasn't until 1960 that Indigenous women and men could vote federally without having to give up their treaty rights or status under the Indian Act. Let that sink in. 1960.
42 years later. Yeah. That is wild.
Yes.
42 years?
And like on their own land.
Like we took this land. This is so... Chinese Canadian and South Asian Canadian women, well, they didn't actually get to have any of these voting rights until 1947. Specifically Chinese and South Asian. Wow. Japanese Canadian women, 1948. And it took until 1988 1988. That's like in our lifetime, like maybe a year before we were born.
Yeah.
For women with intellectual disabilities to no longer be legally barred from voting.
Barred. Not allowed to make a decision. So when people say women got the vote in 1918, what they really mean is a specific group of women got the vote. The rest had to fight even harder for their inclusion, and in many ways still are.
Yes. And this is the basics of intersectionality and why not all women are the same and we shouldn't treat them all the same.
Right.
So fast forward to today, and yes, there's still a lot of work to do, but we've seen a lot of progress, honestly, over the years, while it took a while. But we've also seen what's possible when women lead.
Yeah. So like Kim Campbell, for example, Canada's first and so far only female prime minister. She served in 1993 for a very, very short time. And while her term was brief, her leadership did break barriers. She held more senior cabinet positions than most PMs before becoming leader. And her presence alone proved the electability myth wrong.
But of course, there's a sad part. No woman has led this country since. And despite more women running, politics remains a deeply unequal playing field, especially for Black women, Indigenous women, and women of color.
Which is why voting, organizing, and pushing for better representation is not optional. It's essential. When women are at the decision-making table, policies shift. Childcare gets funded, reproductive rights get protected, pay gaps get called out, and communities get stronger.
And here's the thing, women do show up. In the last federal election, nearly 67% of eligible women voted. 67%, compared to only 63% of men. That's powerful. But it also means a third of women didn't vote. That's millions and millions of voices missing from the conversations that directly impact our lives.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, representation matters. And not just symbolically, but in how laws are written, which services are funded, and whose needs are prioritized. If we're not voting, we're letting other people decide those for us.
So this election, it's our moment to raise our voices, protect our rights, and shape a future where every woman, girl, and gender diverse person has a seat at the table and a say in what comes next.
And to make that happen, we need to understand exactly what's on offer. Because behind every campaign photo, op, and catchy slogan, or things that rhyme with each other, or alliterations, are policies that will directly impact our lives.
So now's the time. We're going to break it down for you. What are the major political parties actually saying about women's rights, equity, safety, and opportunity for us in Canada? Who's showing up with receipts and who's hoping we're not paying attention?
Buckle up, friends. It's time to take a deep policy dive with a feminist lens.
So let's start with some baseline facts. 1 in 3 women in Canada will experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. We'll just hit it hard right out of the gate. Only 14% of girls in grade 10, 14% in grade 10 describe themselves as self-confident. So sad.
Really.
Women account for 91% of parental leave claims, and they face ongoing hiring and promotion discrimination when they return to work.
Right. And over 60% of minimum wage earners in Canada are women. So when we talk about party platforms, we're talking about real life impacts on real life women who are holding this economy up.
So with that in mind, before we get into the nitty gritty of each party's platform, we want to be clear. RaiseHER is, and this podcast are non-partisan. So we're not here to tell you who to vote for. That is up to you. We are here to tell you what's at stake. And when it comes to supporting women, some parties are clearly leading and some are barely showing up. So we're just giving you the facts. What you do with that is up to you.
That doesn't mean that we're endorsing anyone. It means that we're paying attention to what's funded, what's prioritized, what's protected, and what's conveniently left out. And parties are making announcements every day about their platforms. So we are sharing information as we know it today, which is April 15th. So don't come at us.
Something changes tomorrow.
Yeah. It can change in the next few hours. It could change by the time that we let this podcast get out into the world. So just knowing that.
Exactly. Because when you remove the branding, the slogans, the photo ops, what's left are the policies. And that's what actually changes women's lives.
So take what we share today as a jumping off point, take it as research, ask questions, read the platforms, and then vote based on who is really showing up for you and the people that you care about. And then hold that elected party to account and hold them capable. Don't let them get off with making promises that they don't keep. So, as the day that we are recording this, literally this morning, CBC Radio aired an interview that we have to talk about. It featured Dr. Chris Mackey, a Canadian sociologist currently teaching at Minnesota State University. He's also the author of something called The Violent Entanglements: Confronting the Complexities of Gender-Based Violence in Canada, which is a must-read if you care even a little bit about gender-based violence and how it actually operates in this country.
Dr. Mackey did something that no party strategist seems to have done yet, and that is he read through the major federal party platforms to see what they're actually proposing when it comes to intimate partner violence and gender-based violence more broadly. He found that the Conservatives have put forward longer incarceration sentences as their proposed solution. Which Dr. Mackey said was like a hard pass, because here's the thing. The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world and some of the worst rates of violence against women. So if locking people up more actually worked, the U.S. would be a feminist utopia, but we all know it's not.
Yeah, that like locking them up seems to be like
harsher punishment does not work.
Yeah, and it's kind of pulled out of the Clinton playbook of the late 90s, which has not worked this far. So again, and speaking of what is getting attention this week, we should also mention that Mark Carney, the current Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party, unveiled a public safety proposal that includes some pretty serious reforms. His plan calls for criminal code changes, like making it harder for some people to get bail, cracking down on hate-motivated crimes, and expanding the law to cover child exploitation and online sexual abuse. So all great things. But there's also talk of increasing penalties on non-consensual deepfakes, raising the sentence for child luring, and giving more time to prosecute sexual offenses against kids. He even proposes making femicide a first-degree murder offense, which, absolutely will take that. That should have already be a first-degree murder offense. Carney said that protecting children is a collective responsibility, and he's not wrong.
But even with all of that, important as it is, we are still not seeing enough about what happens to women and children when they're trying to escape violence. So this is all focused on the perpetrator, really. So what are we doing about the women? How are we helping them and their families? Shelters, prevention, economic supports, prevention, keyword. Until we start treating safety as more than a criminal justice issue, we're not solving it. It's just a Band-Aid solution. We're just reacting.
Exactly. So in Dr. Mackey's words, it's not about reactive punishment. It's about preventing violence before it starts. And that's what we advocate for here on The Scaries and what we do with RaiseHER Community. You've heard us say this again and again and again and again. But if we want to make real progress, we need prevention-based, trauma-informed, survivor-centered approaches, not just Band-Aids.
Exactly. So this brings us to YWCA Canada, who have been screaming this from the rooftops for years. There's YWCAs in every province across Canada. Shout out to them and their pre-election advocacy work. And they're calling for a nationally coordinated 10-year action plan to end violence against women, alongside direct emergency payments to survivors who need to flee unsafe situations. Because leaving abuse often comes down to, can I actually afford to escape and live on my own?
Which that's terrible. That's what it comes down to.
Totally. And so if you want to learn more about the YWCA Canada platform, go to demandbettertoday.ca and there's all the details there.
Yeah. They also run the largest network of women's shelters in Canada, which we have one here in our hometown. And every night they provide emergency shelter to nearly 12,000 women and children. And they still have to turn away almost 1,000 more every single night, because we don't have the space in this country. We don't have the funding, and newsflash, we don't have a federal plan.
And listen, we know how this goes. The moment gender-based violence comes up in politics, people either default to let's get tough on crime rhetoric or an awkward silence. But as Dr. Mackey pointed out, it's the silence that's the most dangerous, not saying or doing anything. Because when you refuse to acknowledge that violence is happening, and it's happening, in a big way, and it's not getting better as the years go on. When you exclude it from your platform, we're telling survivors they are not worth the space.
So yeah, as you're scrolling through party platforms or listening to debates and you notice nothing about shelters, housing, survivor supports, or prevention strategies, say something. Ask questions, get loud, because it's not just a niche issue. This is a national emergency.
One that actually costs Canada $8.4 billion a year in social services, healthcare, lost productivity, and in the incalculable human suffering.
Totally.
But sure, let's just talk about tax credits for the gym memberships we never use.
Right. And let this be your reminder, intimate partner violence is a political issue. And this election, this is your chance to demand better. Because when a party doesn't even say the words, you can bet that they're not planning to solve the problem.
And if you want to hear the full interview with Dr. Mackey, head to CBC's The Morning Edition Saskatchewan. It's 10 minutes long, and it's a kind of clarity that really cuts through the campaign clutter in a clear way. And we'll drop the link for that in the show notes. Yeah. All right, so deep breath. We're about to get into what each party is seeking and saying about women's rights, economic justice, and how their platform stacks up in this wild, wild election cycle.
So we're going to start with the Liberals. So the Liberals have made some solid commitments on women's issues. Think the $10 a day childcare program, which has already launched in several provinces, and the $81 million sexual and reproductive health fund.
And let's not forget the pharmacare bill they dropped in 2024 that includes contraception coverage. That's not nothing. They've also committed to reducing wait times for surgeries and mental health support.
Stats Canada actually found that women wait longer for access to family doctors and mental health services than men. Addressing this imbalance could really have a huge impact on women's well-being.
And they also passed the Pay Equity Act, which is huge, but the implementation is a little bit patchy. Critics say most federally regulated workplaces haven't completed their pay equity plans, even though the deadline has passed. So how much accountability is the question?
Right. So good policy direction, but a little meh on the follow-through. And let's be real, when it comes to reproductive rights and childcare, consistency matters. Women can't afford to be the afterthought in budget execution.
Exactly. And just when we thought we had this momentum, boom. In March 2025, the former minister and now Prime Minister Mark Carney eliminated the standalone Ministry of Women and Gender Equality.
That's right. So in the middle of the United Nations review of Canada's gender equity commitments, the ministry was folded into a broader portfolio, sparking national and international backlash from women's rights organizations, including this one.
Yes. Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights said it best. It's a dangerous move at a critical time. Without a dedicated minister or budget, many fear this sends a message that gender equity is no longer a federal priority.
And this isn't just a bureaucratic shuffle. It was a rollback at a moment when visibility and resourcing are super critical.
Exactly.
So next we have the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, who say they are pro-choice but have refused to commit to protecting abortion access from legislation introduced by backbench MPs. That's not nothing. That raises major questions.
And let's be clear, in a 2023 video, Poilievre praised the U.S. Supreme Court for overturning Roe versus Wade as a victory for the state. Yikes.
This conservative platform focuses on freedom of choice, quote unquote, for families and proposes tax credits instead of universal programs. That's fine if you're middle to upper class, but for single mothers or families living below the poverty line, that's a non-starter.
No paid sick days, no pharmacare, no childcare strategy for a party aiming to support families. It's glaringly obvious who's getting left out.
Right. Next, we have the NDP, which stands for, if you don't know, the New Democratic Party. And the NDP is consistently the loudest and most detailed on women's issues. They're fully pro-choice, committed to expanding access in underserved areas, and want to make reproductive care part of the Canada Health Act.
Led by Jagmeet Singh, his 2024 promise to close the gaps in health access for rural and Indigenous women would mean a ton, especially in provinces where access to OBGYNs is very limited.
Right. They've also pledged $500 million to implement the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, which is great.
Yes, and they want universal mental health care, a national school lunch program, more investment in co-op housing. Basically, they recognize that equity requires actual funding.
Right. Oh, and they've also called out the wage gap, promising more federal transparency around corporate pay audits. It's giving policy nerds who actually care.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have the Green Party. So the Greens are idealists led by not one, but two co-leaders, Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau. But their ideas are good. Guaranteed livable income could lift hundreds of thousands of women out of poverty, especially those juggling caregiving with precarious part-time jobs.
They've promised dedicated funding for shelters and housing for women fleeing domestic violence, which we know is crucial.
Right. And Elizabeth May actually called gender-based violence a national emergency in a 2024 speech. That's the energy that we need. Now, only if they had more seats in Parliament to push it through.
Exactly. They also back universal dental and pharmacare, which disproportionately helps women and especially racialized women and those who are often uninsured.
Right. So last we have the People's Party of Canada, the PPC. It's led by Maxime Bernier, and he wants to repeal the Canada Health Act and let provinces run health and education with minimal federal interference. That poses real risks for access to care if you live in a province cutting back on gender affirming care or reproductive services.
Bernier has said he would leave abortion up to the provinces and doesn't believe in federal involvement, which is cool until rural provinces closes the last abortion clinic in a town, and then we're up Schitt's Creek.
Yeah, they don't mention pay equity or gender-based violence or childcare or literally anything that acknowledges the distinct needs of women and gender diverse people.
I wonder why. Maybe because there are no women in that party at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not giving 1997, it's giving 1952.
Okay, so why does this all matter? Well, we need to be making informed decisions, and we need to be making them now.
In the 2024 U.S. election, women made up 52% of all voters. That's right, more than half, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And among them, younger women, especially under 40, turned out in record numbers to defend reproductive rights, climate action, and equity policies.
Those numbers tell us something really important. That women have the numbers. We just need to match that with momentum.
Exactly. But in Canada, women's voter turnout, especially with younger women specifically, has dropped in the recent elections. In 2019, women aged 18 to 24 had the lowest turnout at just 57%.
That means this election is our moment to shift that, to demand better, to elect leaders who understand that women's issues are Canadian issues.
Which brings us to someone who embodies that shift.
So Joan Pratchler is a member of the Legislative Assembly in Saskatchewan with the NDP. Before stepping into politics, she worked as both a registered nurse and a separate school board teacher and administrator. Talk about multi-talented.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know about that.
Joan has spent her entire career advocating for vulnerable communities, whether at the bedside, in the community, or in the classroom. And now she's doing that advocacy in the legislature, bringing lived experience to policy tables.
So she knows firsthand what it's like to be the only woman in the room and why that room needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
So we're thrilled to welcome her to the show. Welcome, Joan.
Welcome, Joan. Yay.
Yes.
Okay, Joan, are we going to do the rapid fires?
Oh, yeah. Let's do some rapid fires.
Okay.
We don't actually have any.
We didn't include these, but these have nothing to do with the topic of today. These are just questions to kind of just let loose and just get you warmed up. So
There you go.
our first rapid fire question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Just do it.
Ooh.
Just do it. It was before Nike did it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Trademark
What are you
Joan
waiting
Pratchler.
You don't need somebody's permission to be who you are.
I love that.
Totally.
Incredible. The question that I always love to ask is, what if you could have one wish for women everywhere? What would it be?
Grant one wish.
Like grant one
Yes.
wish.
That they would be able to live their most richest and fullest life.
Hmm.
Great answer. And whatever that looks like for them.
That's right.
Beautiful. Okay, last question. What is your scary? So what keeps you up at night?
The vulnerable people, whether they be women, children, whoever are the vulnerable people, are not being helped.
Mm-hmm.
And that
I
they're
feel ya.
invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And left invisible, probably too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So Joan, I hope you're feeling warm and ready to go. But we'll start light. So just a little bit page into your history. So you've had two major careers, like we outlined, nursing and teaching, which are pretty big swings from each other, which in some ways maybe not, but I would say so. So, and those were two things. And now you're in politics. So what inspired you to make that leap between those two professions and then now go into politics?
Well, there's not much of a leap.
Okay.
You are who you are where you are.
Mhm.
And so you're the accumulation of everything that you've lived and experienced. And so I bring teaching into nursing. I bring nursing into teaching. I bring both of those things in being a mom and a grandma. And I bring that into politics, I guess. I walked in that door. Well, here I am. Yeah.
And do those two, your two prior professions, make you want to go into politics because of the things, the gaps that you saw, and the people that you supported or maybe you saw weren't supported?
Everything is politics.
Right.
Being a mom is politics.
Mm-hmm.
You can either eat this or you can eat this green vegetable. Which one will you start with? Right? And when you're teaching grade 2, okay, you can either do your math now or you could do your language arts, but which one are you going to do? It's all politics. If politics is about influencing and helping to move things forward, that's what it is. Same in nursing. You can choose to do this therapy or you can choose to have that. So which would it be best for? And what's in it for you if you do that? So I see politics as more just another pathway of influencing to help people get to the place they might want to be.
Very cool. Love that.
Nursing and teaching are also very heart forward professions. It's very much you wear your heart in your sleeve and you care about people, and it's about caring. And so it's very nice to see someone with that kind of mentality going into politics as well, because sometimes it's not necessarily those things.
Well, people focused and service focused, right? You're serving others 100%. So that's nice to have that background to know that you're leading a big area of our politics. Yeah. Totally.
So what are some of the specific challenges that you see women in your riding, and then maybe kind of just overall in Saskatchewan, face that you think public policy could better address?
I think they're facing the challenge of being visible and important and being seen and being heard. Our riding has a variety of ages, but I know the demographics are perhaps a little bit older than some areas of the city. And there's still people thinking that they don't matter. How can that be?
How would you characterize, this is just an offshoot question, how would you characterize invisibility? And would you say that they're invisible in the actual decisions that are being made? They're invisible in the policies that are coming forward? They're invisible in what way?
How often I went on the doors steps and talked to people. And I suppose we'll get into that later, but and they say, "Oh, and now you're going into politics?" That's what the man would say at the door, and the lady behind would, you're doing it. You're doing it. So they almost feel that somebody put an invisibility cloak in front of them, but they've got that, I could do that. And while I was in nursing, and, obviously I had retired already, and I'd been nursing and in the program, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm in the nursing program. Oh, I could do that. How many people said, will you inspire me? I said, it's not too late. What do you mean it's too late? It's not too late.
Right.
You can do it. And sometimes you do need those role models. That's why I went into teaching. That's why I pushed to try to get into administration, and eventually went into administration, because those little boys and little girls need to know that women can do that too.
I love that. That's exactly what we talk about at RaiseHER, which is that if you can see it, you can be it. And so often we need those role models and people to say exactly that. Oh, okay, that's not actually, I'm not too old or too young or not knowledgeable enough or whatever it is to actually make those choices. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. Okay. So in a time when democracy feels fragile, what does civic engagement look like to you, especially for women?
Okay, I want you to picture this in your mind.
Okay.
A 3 or 4-year-old little boy who's got the Superman costume on, and it's well past Halloween. He's got the cape on, and he's standing there, she's standing there with her hands on her hips. That's the image. That's the image that people need to have, and I hope people would have. That you can do it. Just get your hands on your hip, get that cape on, and get out there and do it.
So in terms of voting, in terms of rallying, in terms of all of that, is that kind of what you're getting alluding to?
Imagine a stage and you have a spotlight. That spotlight, that circle that it's on, I say to women, That's your spotlight. That's your space. You just march right there and you take that space and you take that spot. That's yours. You can have it. You don't have to apologize for it. Get there. And don't listen to what anybody else is saying. Just do it.
What about as someone, I mean, I think because this comes from a place of privilege too, as white presenting women and that sort of thing. What would you say to someone who is of a and not a space of privilege, so either of how they present themselves or who they love or how they love or whatever it may be? What would you say to someone who has, I would say, maybe a little bit less quote unquote kind of power?
You have every right to be there.
Yeah.
Nobody's in charge of your of how you're allowed to feel. You have every right to be there. Go. Period.
Period. Mic drop.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah. You don't need somebody's permission to take up your own space.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what we need to allow ourselves to take up space too, because for so often, I mean, even that woman that you were just talking about of standing behind the invisibility cloak of we don't want to take up space, and it's scary to take up space.
You're allowed to.
Yeah.
You're allowed to. Yeah.
What about what you would say to women? And this was me, like unapologetically and candidly, I honestly didn't really care about politics until I had kids, because I didn't really understand how it impacted me or feel it really. And a lot of women and people in general are overwhelmed by politics. There's people knocking at your door every other day wanting to talk, and I'm just like, I don't want to answer. I don't have enough like good questions to say. I don't, you know what I mean? But I do want to know, but I don't know what to say. So what would you say to those women who are just like, I don't know if voting like does it really make a difference? I don't know enough about it. There's too many things to learn. What do I do? And if I vote, I'm going to vote the wrong way, so I just won't do it. Like, what would you say to them?
It's not that hard. Men do it. You have every right to vote. You have every right to be there. You have every right not to feel confident all the time. That's okay. But do something. Being scared is not okay. Being scared pulls you back from who you are. Just do it. Take that first step and do it.
What do you think would be the first step for people to get, especially for women, to get involved in politics? Like in addition to voting, showing up and voting, but what are ways for folks to get involved in politics that is not as overwhelming as like, let's read every party's,
or just like informed?
Yes.
How do I like quickly have a snapshot about what?
Well, I don't know. I
matters?
suppose, trying to watch the news and sort things out, but you can't even do that.
No,
it's like a big mishmash of stew. I don't know. Like to physically get involved in politics, you just watch from the sidelines for a while. Like there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. Like don't be jumping into the deep end right away.
Right.
But observing, watching, maybe finding somebody that could, walk beside. You can. I got involved because somebody said, "Well, why don't you check out this party?" I don't know because I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But you watch and you listen, you go, okay, how hard can it be? Let's see this. And then you start asking your own questions, or you start listening to news reports and you start going, so what are they really saying there? Like it's really pulling on that critical thinking. Because it's not just vote. It is vote. Voting is important, obviously. I'm not saying that. But it's the insight into voting, the insight into democracy. It's connecting the dots of what's happened in past history. Because we see what's happened in the States, and people just, the good people will step out. It'll be okay. Good people always, sure. Sure. No, not sure. And that's the other thing why I chose to run. I'm going, well, I would come home. I was doing a lot of vaccinations with COVID, right? And we were called everything from everything. Yeah. And I come, you never guess what happened. Why don't good people step up and fix this? This is when they started to open up everything, and anybody, you just spread it everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I knew that my friends who were working at the Pasco Hospital, because we were in that big center at Everest Place giving vaccinations, thousands. And I knew there's only X amount of ventilators, and there's just not going to be enough. So when they said they were going to open it up, I go, in 2 weeks, we're not going to be able to help. And I come home and I said, why don't good people just step up? Like, why don't people that follow evidence-based practice just step up? Why don't Good people should do that. Yeah, they should. Well, we had that conversation for about 2 months straight. And then one day we just stopped cold. Well, we're good people.
Right.
Could we? I go, no. And then I thought about it. I go, well, like, how is this any harder from being one of the first administrators in an all-male place? How is this any harder from being the chair of the board in an organization with vulnerable people that you have to take care of? It's no different. How hard can it be? Because we'd listen, my husband said, well, listen, that guy talking on the news, would you ever say anything that stupid? I go, well, no, I think it could be in politics. Okay, well, bar.
It's quite low. Yes. Yeah,
That's fair enough.
So moving on to what we were talking about in kind of our introduction and gender equity and all of that, and what we're obviously very passionate about as Raise Her. How do you keep gender equity centered in decision making, especially where in a world where those priorities are kind of increasingly under threat? And I might preface by saying that even as recently as, we talk again a lot about gender equity, and we had folks come at us when we were speaking out about something to say, well, it's about the economy, and it's about the economy, and it's about the economy. And we were like, of course we want to live in a world where we can afford things and, support our children and all that kind of stuff, but you can't forget about the equity piece of it. And so, that's kind of where that question comes from for us, is how do you keep gender equity at the center of decision making when so many people just say, shh, don't talk about it?
First, you have to be that person. It takes a lot of courage. I had to do a lot of thinking before I went into it because you put everything on the line.
Yeah.
And so you have to be that person. I could have stayed back and go, well, that's some good people. That's fine. We'll vote and we'll be done with it. But you have to put your money where your mouth is. And you put your values where who you are. And how to keep gender equity. You go to the edges of society. You go to where the vulnerable people are. That's where you find who needs to have equity. And I guarantee you will find women there.
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, that is actually the case. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But then you have to be that equity for them. And you have to be a role model. I always wanted to look towards role model. I think at this phase in my life, I have to take that responsibility and be that role model.
Right.
And there's that sense of like that kind of false humility, or me. Yeah, I'm saying, well, why me? And I go, well, why not you? Because it sure as heck isn't anybody else, is it?
Yeah.
So you have what you have. You have you have who you are. You have all those things in your past, all those struggles, all the excitement, all the wonderful things that have happened, and those joys. They're all there. That's all really important. And you've lived this long. Can you not help other people? That's what it's about.
Using that privilege for good and not evil.
Yeah. And then follow through.
Yeah.
That's a key. A lot of people want to do things. How many people follow through?
Right. Actually get them done.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
As someone who's worked in both the public sector and in government, what does real accountability to women and equity deserving communities look like to you?
When you go up to someone and you look in their eye and you say, I will do right by you, and then do it. That's accountability.
It's like gonna make me cry.
Yeah, seriously.
Just thinking about like so many different things, even, the amount of times that we've interacted with decision makers and policymakers and government and all kinds of things, and bringing issues to the forefront, and just at the center of it all being a human experience, and having someone saying, like, I see you, I hear you, and I understand you, and I'm going to use now that, again, that privilege and that power for good and not evil, and actually do something about it.
I remember I was in, Catholic healthcare and faith-based healthcare. And I remember we went to one workshop, and the person said, so when you're a nurse or a healthcare provider and you talk to someone who's in the bed, you go down so that your heart is at their same level. And then you talk to them. because when your hearts aren't at the same level, nothing else will be either.
Yeah, I love that.
I do love that. Yeah.
And today at the rally at the legislature, I went and looked at those little children in their eyes.
Aw.
And I didn't say it out loud, but I said, I will do right by you. That matters.
You're gonna make me cry, Jill. Seriously.
Feels it.
I'm an emotional gal.
Yeah.
But seriously, yeah, it's as simple as that, and not as simple. Like, that's a real commitment.
Yeah.
And
And then you just leave that little space after it and just let that melt into them. That's the space.
And I think that's also like what, being an advocate is about too. And so as a politician, but also just what we do as advocates, and saying, I hear you. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to run with it. And
I'm going to own that.
Yeah.
And I'll be back to show you what I've done.
Yeah. So looking forward then, I mean, we are in a big decision-making time. And some big decisions are going to be made in the next, 10 days or so, from the time that this is airing. So what gives you hope about the direction that women's rights and representation is going in Canada?
Well, great hope that there are lots of little boys out there that have no patience with people making fun of their mums or their sisters or their little friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've had the luxury now over the last maybe 20, 30 years to see women in roles of, governance, roles of, leadership. They go, yeah, what's the big deal? That's where the hope is. Because you hear different conversations on the playground. I hear different conversations with my son, who's your age. Yeah, so what's the problem? Like, I mean, we have a woman finance minister. We had a woman minister of defense. You couldn't have had that 20 years ago. The heck, what does women know? But now nobody bats an eye. Did we hear anybody saying there shouldn't be? So I have great hope, because our little boys and our little girls are who they are. And the little girls now they all have their capes. They'll all put on their capes. And they all know why they have to put on their capes, because we have to be good to others.
Yeah.
And that's key, because that's the future. And we have to make sure that keeps happening, because that's where the answer is. If the answer was in big people, this would be done by now, but it's not.
Oh, yeah, no.
Totally.
And we keep screwing it up. So, yeah. I love that. I think that going forward, we really need to believe that the future is possible and that we can and be the change. I saw something on social media that said there was a stat, and I think it was like from some kind of science and women account on Instagram, and it said that now more little kids draw women as scientists than men as scientists. When they're asked to draw scientists, they draw women, and that's just because of what's been changing and what's put before them. And if they can see it, then they can be it, and they believe it, and all that thing. So kind of full circle.
It's that representation. It's huge.
I don't need anybody's permission to be a woman. I don't need anybody's permission to be strong, caring, kind. I don't need anybody's permission to be sometimes not confident in things. I don't need their permission. I'm not asking for it. Step aside. I'd like to be myself. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think also the permission to try and fail.
Yeah.
Because I think for so long, women, I mean, even still now, me as a human being, I still have to give myself space and grace to fail and be okay with failing if we fail, or when I fail, because it's going to happen. But I think for so long, women are like, you're put on this, you have to be really, really good at what you're going to do. Otherwise you shouldn't do it. And that's not real. That's not real life. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how we learn, right?
Totally.
That's how we learn.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's how the men learn. They just didn't advertise it.
Well, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that like the pedagogy?
And they just feel like they get more choice, like more chances than us, right? Like if we fail once, then no one's ever going to hire us. If a man fails 5 times, then it's no big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's right.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share, Joan, in terms of as we kind of go into this season of voting, and federally, of course, and in a space where there could be a lot of change, and there should be a lot of change, and we're hoping good change and not scary change.
Well, and then we have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We are the government. The government isn't someplace in Ottawa. It's not someplace in the legislature. We are the government.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get older, we understand, the logistics and how that all works. But how we treat other people, how we treat how we treat our neighbors, how we treat people in our family, that is how we treat people in our country, in our province. It is just that simple. It is not complicated.
Mm-hmm.
What's a kind thing to do? And you can disagree, and that's fine. And do that. You might have another way of doing that, but you can't be hurtful. And if you have everything that you have is part of who you are, our job here is not to mooch off society. Our job here is to contribute to it. And government is one of those ways we do that. And it is our problem when our neighbor's house is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be able to take responsibility and not take things for granted. Today we had a guest in the legislature who was in a concentration camp 80 years after it was liberated. She was there. And I just want to say, do you see this?
Mm-hmm.
This really happened. This really happened in another country far away. And you've all been to Europe, and you can, and we take that for granted. But when you're in Rouen, France, and you see that there are the holes in the wall of the church that you're walking by to get to that cappuccino, that reminds you that, in the mid-40s, there was a war here. It is still here.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not going to make that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that here, so therefore it mustn't have happened. I don't think
Right.
so. We have an imagination to imagine we don't want that again. But people don't understand. That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens when we take it for granted. And we have a responsibility to help be the government, to help be the society we want it to be. And part of that is voting. Part of that is finding out how you can, what's your role to play in that. And you know what? It takes effort. Yeah, it took effort in that concentration camp to stay alive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It takes effort to be a role model. It takes effort to be a person that cares.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what politics is. Small p, big P politics. What effort are you putting in to make this world a better place?
Right. And leave it better. That
Yeah.
7-generation
That's
thinking.
right.
Totally. It's about the people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world has an axis. It's not you. And Dante never said, I exist, therefore you owe me.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the phrase. So, like, what do you owe other people?
Love it. People over profit. Can't say it in any better way,
Yeah.
right? Amazing. Well, thank you so very much, Joan. You're such a light and such a wealth of wisdom. So we appreciate your perspectives and all the things that you're doing and all the change you're making
And
in our
advocating for
community.
it. Yeah.
It's good work.
So here's the part where we say, yes, you absolutely can do something. In fact, you have more power than you think. You just got to do it. In the words of Joan.
Just do it. First things first, make sure you're registered to vote. You can do that by visiting elections.ca, and you can even check your registration, update your address, or register for the first time right there. It's super, super easy.
And if you moved since the last election or changed your name or recently turned 18, go double check. Do it now. It takes like 2 minutes, so do it now.
You'll receive your voter information card in the mail if you haven't already if you are registered, and it'll tell you where and when to vote. Super, super slick. This includes information for both election day and the advanced polls.
And pro tip, advanced polls are such a vibe.
Oh, God.
They're usually less busy. You can vote on your schedule. And this year they're open from April 18th to 21st. So over this upcoming long weekend from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Can't vote in your home riding on election day? Well, no problem.
Yes, you can also vote early at the 500 plus Elections Canada offices across the country up until April 22nd at 6 p.m. And again, you have to use that special ballot process.
There are also voting options for Indigenous electors, students on campus, Canadians living abroad, Canadian Forces members, incarcerated voters, people without a fixed address, and voters in remote and low density communities. All you have to do is just visit Elections Canada, and they have all of that information.
Make sure to bring your ID. You'll need 1 piece of government issued ID with your name, photo, and address, or 2 pieces of ID with your name and one with your address. There's a full list of all of this on the Elections Canada website. And no, we are not paid by Elections Canada to do this podcast. We're just giving you all the details.
But if you'd like to sponsor, please do that. And if you don't have your ID, you can still vote if someone in your riding vouches for you and brings theirs. And if you have a piece of mail, it really takes no excuses.
Really, all you need to be eligible are to be a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old on election day, and able to prove your identity and address.
So that's how to vote and what specifically to do to vote. But finally, talk to your friends. Ask your group chat who they're voting for and why. I mean, they don't have to tell you, but start a conversation, post resources, offer rides to the polls, make it social, make it loud, make it yours.
Because this election, it's not just about party platforms. It's about showing up for your future and holding politicians and elected officials to account to deliver on what they promise and on what is important, on what is going to create the kind of community and society in which we all want to live, work, and play.
Totally. So get out there, be informed, be loud, and vote like your rights depend on it, because they just might.
And remember, this is not the one day thing only. Voting, you can do other things to support these policies and the things that we want to see. Even if we don't end in a vote that matches what you voted for, there are things that you can do to still make change beyond April 28th.
And stay engaged.
Exactly.
So with that, thank you for joining us today as we confronted these very terrifying but real life things impacting women and girls. Please share this episode, rate and subscribe wherever you are listening, and stay tuned for more ways to make a positive impact. Together, we can make the world a little less scary for women and girls.
Follow us on Instagram at RaiseHER Co and scaries.podcast, and on TikTok at RaiseHER Co. And remember, change starts with awareness and action. Thank you for being a part of the Scaries community and making this world a little less scary to exist as a woman. Bye.